Production.
And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. And for those of you that are watching this as a recording, hello. My name is Michael Haynes, SME B2B Customer Marketing Strategy Specialist. Welcome to Breaking Through B2B, our Beyond Pandemic series, which I'm conducting with my co-host, Nick Fagan of Next Practice. Nick, how you doing?
Hello there, Michael. Thank you.
Excellent.
Good to see you again.
Likewise. And for those that are first-time viewers of the Beyond Pandemic series, so Breaking Through B2B and this Beyond Pandemic series is all about helping SMEs, how they're going to recover, thrive, and move forward in this next normal. So for those of you, as you join us, please jump in and say good day and let us know where you're coming in from. And so today's theme, Nick and I decided to have today's theme as getting your house in order. The past 6 months, wouldn't you say, Nick, have been, well, interesting to say the least, and you're in lockdown in Melbourne, so I'm sure you have a few added adjectives.
It's Groundhog Day, there's 2 words.
Yes, but coming out of lockdown, hopefully it's something that we're all of us across Australia and elsewhere are going to be coming into as we come to the end of 2020 and into 2021. So it's really about starting to position for recovery and for growth and for moving forward. And so Nick and I decided to have this episode on getting about alignment with sales and marketing. This is something that we both feel very strongly about, and it's going to be really critical for us as SME product and service providers. For those of us operating particularly in the B2B space, it's very important that that alignment of sales and marketing coming together is really going to be quite important. Going to be really quite important because when we're talking about selling in a B2B context, selling to other product and service providers, the business buyer has changed somewhat. So prior to the whole pandemic, B2B sales is known for its complexity, lots of decision makers, everyone's using multiple sources, and this is all still very true. I think on average now, I don't know what you've heard, Nick, I think I've heard on average 6 to 7 stakeholders involved in the decision-making process is pretty common. And there also, is that something that you've heard and come across?
Yes, Michael. I think what we've found is that sales cycle and that length of communication has been extended because 1 or 2 might extend into, you say, 3 or 4 decision makers in the discussion, which is like a gate upon gate, which is going to be, well, it's topical because we're talking about that in terms of what a buyer's looking for, and it's that assurance and confidence. And why wouldn't you build in those gates to check? Validate. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, you're quite absolutely right. So there's more decision makers involved. I think 7 is kind of the magic number that's kind of being floated around now. Each of those now, B2B buyers are doing a lot more self-educating, self-research. That's something that's been quite prominent and even increasing even more so now. On average, 3 to 5 sources of what people do in terms of what they look at, who they read, who they're talking to. So you have multiple decision makers all doing multiple kinds of looking at different sources, all trying to gain that consensus. So you have that buying complexity. Now that we're in this post-pandemic environment now, there's a lot of volatility, a lot of uncertainty. So as you alluded to, Nick, decision makers now are really looking for that decision confidence. They really want that clarity as to what they need to do, how to move forward, and how to get there. So really, they're fundamentally the needs of the business buyer have changed somewhat, even to 6-7 months ago, because as part of getting that clarity and confidence, which is what business leaders are looking for, business buyers are looking for, they're looking for that insight and guidance, that prescriptive guidance to really know what it is they should be doing. So they're looking for ideas in terms of new opportunities on how they can identify new market opportunities, new revenue opportunities, how they can address some of their key issues. So they're looking for ideas, advice, perspectives on that. They're looking for actionable solutions as well. They're also looking for people they can talk to bounce off ideas and to help them navigate all that self-research that they have been doing, because they do a lot of self-research to the point now where a lot of B2B buyers, I think the latest stat I read is that 70% of B2B buyers won't talk to anyone from your company, any kind of sales rep, until they've actually fully identified their needs. So with that, is that something you've come?
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, you've touched on some really good points there. I'd say that from our experience and dealing with our clients who we coach as well, buyers are becoming more skilled at researching the solution. You know, they are, and in that way, as you say, gauging pricing. But what they really want, and I guess what they're quickly doing, I've got to say, is the pros and cons of services. You best be prepared. And I must say that, you know, in this sort of format, when it's less face-to-face physically, more virtual, we as providers need to adapt skills and ability to understand the client quickly and the pain points quickly. And what you say is very true. What are the potential solutions and problem solve with them? And I like the word that you use there as guide, because that's a very good conversation to have with clients. I reckon that's just as the digital preference becomes more evident, our methods may change, but still that guidance is still critical, Michael. But helping them get to that point where it's solving their problem, you know, and that's that guidance facilitated discovery piece.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Nick. And from some of the clients I've been talking to, both here in Australia, in Canada, and the US as well, again, it's all about business leaders, you know, the SME CEOs. They want that clearly to know what to do. Where are the opportunities? What should they be doing in terms of client expansion, going after new market opportunities? And also they want help in terms of kind of distilling and working through the noise, because there's lots of stuff, you know, available online now, both in terms of, you know, white papers, blogs. There, you know, every week there's got to be who knows how many workshops, webinars, virtual events. And so there's all this information that's being thrown at them as to what they should do. So they're really needing some help and guidance to help them navigate and what are going to be the solutions that are going to be helping them. So
fantastic, Michael. Yeah, that noise piece is huge at the moment and cutting through that. But I like this session that you and I talk about what is the practical things that we can actually apply. And I think that's what people want. As guides, these are the things to try. You know, these are the things to implement and execute on,
Exactly. And that's exactly what they're looking for, is that guidance as to what are the opportunities, and help them navigate, but also how do they execute to get to that endpoint in mind. So given these changes that we're seeing, it's really changing the landscape now as to what selling is and the role of marketing and sales. And while this is something I'm sure you've seen has been talked about quite a bit, particularly when we talk to our, look at mid-market and our big corporate brothers and sisters over there who have been struggling with this. It's something that really needs to happen in this new next norm, which is highly virtual. And you have decision makers who are looking for that confidence. They want that guidance because they're now looking for advisors and partners as opposed to just a supplier per se. So it's really changing the dynamic of marketing and sales, and to the point really that sales and marketing, it's having a whole new, it's taking a whole new perspective now. Business buyers look at our organizations as product and service providers as one organization, and they're looking to us as being one provider, one source of truth, advice, guidance, and it's really those companies that can really help and work with these buyers, with these clients. Those are the ones that are going to be winning now. So yeah, it's really changing the landscape now, that in terms of sales and marketing, the two really need to come together. They can no longer working in silos. Business buyers, business customers don't see them as in silos, and now very much based on what they're looking for, they're really needing that one entity working quite collaboratively to really help them in terms of what they're looking for, because it's no longer just showing up and making the pitch and just being a supplier of a particular product or service. They're actually looking for a lot more. So,
and I've got to say that's true, Michael. In fact, in our service offerings ourselves, we are being stretched to provide that end-to-end solution. And I like what you said there, one source of truth, you know what I mean? Why not be that resource for that particular person? Because their pain points are the things you really need to understand. And I don't like the word or the words one-stop shop, but realistically, you can add value at either end. It's not just transactional, as you're saying. I think there's a great deal of value to put at either end of that pre-delivery and post-delivery services that we can offer. I wanted to ask you a question in that too, Michael. The fact is that center of all this is always trust. building that trust to be able to deliver across
Very
that.
good point. Yes.
Yes, and that's something that in the research that I've been looking at and talking with clients, they want that quickly. But the challenge is really understanding that need and the buyer's need. But how do you equate that with the immediate trust building and rapport building to get that message across? And that's something that comes up consistently.
I think that's a great point that you've raised, Nick. Trust is very important. It's quite critical. It's critical in this environment because from talking to various SMEs, they have the financial resources often available to make the spend, but they're quite cautious now. They want to know, given the volatility and uncertainty of what's going on, and there's always been a degree of skepticism in the B2B world with business buyers, who have often gotten burned from, different consultants and providers and so forth. So they want that certainty and that trust. And that trust has been somewhat compromised even before all of this pandemic. I know there were some big studies done in the US through Edelman and Co. And trust is at an all-time low. And I think that's where the whole insights and guidance and really providing that help and giving them the right kind of tools to help them make decisions will help build that trust. And going back to a previous point that you made, Nick, with regards to the one-stop shop in terms of trying to cater to a holistic, broader set of needs, it also can be about helping them to, again, distill some of that information and help them make sense of what they're hearing. And it might be about referring them to, let's say, an IT specialist or some subject matter expert to help them. So it's not all about focusing about you saying what your company and your offerings can do for them, but it's also, being that bridge and making those introductions to who you know on LinkedIn. Oh, I know this company who specializes in that, and providing and building that, being that conduit. That is also something that very much business buyers are quite keen to look for. And within our SME tribe of our SME people, they're quite keen to be talking to other SMEs to say, who are you talking to? What's worked for you? That has been quite something that is very highly sought after right now in this, unpredictable new norm that we're in.
Yeah, I think that those touchstones that you mentioned, Michael, are critical, and that does go a long way to building the rapport and trust. But being that I suppose confident referral source, if you like, is that credibility piece as well. As you say, the network that you can provide, that credibility piece, which is then trust is then front and center. And that's what I've experienced myself with clients and those who are trying to establish that in the market as SMEs. So yeah, good points.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great way to really strongly deliver value. So everyone talks about, aligning marketing and sales, and, so what does that really look like? So in terms of what I think that fundamentally means is, again, it's really putting the buyers, when we're talking B2B, at the center, making sure that marketing sales are working as one, for which I've seen a few models are coming to emerge now where marketing and sales teams are being brought together under the umbrella of revenue operations, revenue generation, where it's one team where they're aligned in terms of the goals of the business, what are the goals from a revenue generating perspective, and then making sure you're aligned on that. So, you being an MD yourself, Nick, saying to your team within Next Practice, this is what we're set out to do in terms of the organization, who we want to be moving forward. What does this mean in terms of our first phase one, in terms of revenue, what does this mean? And then what needs to be delivered to that? And to be successful in B2B, it's about taking a buyer approach, understanding who those buyers are, what organizations we're going to be focusing on, and then really making sure we're delivering those tools, advice, and all the things that those buyers need to fulfill that. So it's going to involve a lot of things, I think, coordinating, having a single view of, okay, in terms of our goals, in terms of revenue, business goals, having alignment in terms of who the ideal customer is, and the buyers that we have to deal with to meet the needs of those customers and buyers. And then it's really about collaboration across creating holistic sales and marketing plans, regular communicating, having that regular cadence and check-in. Are these sorts of the things, so what have you seen, Nick, in terms of where you have seen that marketing and sales coming together particularly in an SME context, can you enlighten us in terms of either what you guys are doing in Next Practice or what you're seeing in terms of some of the dynamics in terms of trying to bring this together in terms of bringing to meet buyer requirements?
Yeah, look, I think first and foremost, what you said in the beginning is critical, and that's the strategic view of the organisation, as you say, where we are heading as an organisation, what are our values, those things that underpin who we are and demonstrate that to the market, that they're critical. Of course, the financial drivers are there, but, you know, things like our brand KPIs and our brand promises, what are they? You know, these are the things we coach our businesses to say, let's pin those things down and put that in our strategic plan. Because then, as you say, I think it's then the next discussion to say, who are the people and organisations we want to work with that will take us to those objectives or help us meet those objectives. And I'm glad that you said the aligning piece, but that's the flag in the ground that sets the direction for the business. It's critical that we all have our eye on that. And it could be, and that priority, what is that number one priority? But I like the way that you position the fact that who is it that we need to start to think about in our current client database that will help us meet those objectives. And then the second part of that, Michael, is who would be those new clients or the ideal client moving forward that will help us achieve those objectives. Does that make sense? And I think that you've put that really well. I just want to make a point here and bringing those teams together, because often enough, let's just talk about some of the issues and the problem we're trying to solve here is that sometimes you said communication, it's critical, but sometimes there's a breakdown of communication or miscommunication between two internal groups, marketing with their expectations and thoughts, and the salespeople who would consider themselves at the coalface and hearing exactly what, and not just salespeople, but people in service delivery too have their perspective on that, those needs, the buyer's needs, the client needs. But the fact is, like bringing or creating, as you say, a forum or a place where they can come together and express what it is that they're actually hearing and seeing and feeling, goes a long way to breaking down those silos and actually asking the questions, particularly of clients too in the mix. So we talk about data down the track here, but let's start with saying, how could we position ourselves to get that data up front? Well, our employees are a great source of data as well as our clients. Does that make sense? So asking them what their experience is, they are a stakeholder. So getting that and putting it laid on the table is great information and something maybe that I haven't seen or realised a different perspective, right? And that goes a long way to having people heard, and by being heard, I'm less frustrated and more likely to be able to deliver on what the company or the organisation's plans are without distraction or noise. You know, and there's question sets that we like to encourage, and we talked about this just this week, Michael. You know, the question set that you can ask internally with your internal stakeholders and employees, and particularly your clients, are saying, what should we, as an SME, start doing, stop doing, and keep doing? And that's a basic question set that can be asked of those stakeholders, Michael, to start the conversation in a given forum, because that's the way we go about looking at the services and looking for those who we seek to serve. Does that make sense?
Well, that completely makes sense. And you've raised a couple of things that you've raised there. So one, in terms of the whole marketing and sales alignment, it's marketing and sales which are very much leading the charge, but it very much has to be cross-functional in the organization, because at the end of the day, it's delivering to your customers. And so it will involve marketing, it will involve sales, but other people that are going to potentially involved are, customer success. If we're talking in the IT world, customer service folks are often going to be involved. Anyone that's involved in client delivery. So if you're a professional service firm and you're delivering consulting services, advice, reporting, any of those front of line folks as well. So there's marketing, sales, your client delivery, your product people, they all need to be working in alignment, because again, your business buyers now are looking for multiple things from you. And so it's about being able to cater and delivering to those. in terms of getting an understanding, I think marketing and sales, in terms of getting that understanding of the buyer, I think there needs to be more collaboration and less around the silos. In terms of your interaction, and one of the things I want to talk about in next week in virtual selling in our next session, in terms of having some of those discussions with your business buyers, that needs to be cross-functional. This whole idea of just a salesperson showing up to the meeting, those days are over. This needs to be collaboration right across the board. It's something I've seen and I've done in other contexts with mid-market and larger organizations where we've had strategic customer workshops where it's cross-functional in terms of senior folk from the service provider, representatives, cross-representation from the client as well, so that you can get those full level of detailed insight in terms of what are their requirements, their priorities, what's required from a decision maker level, as well as some of the intricacies and implications from a user perspective as well. So there needs to be, there are cross-functional, there are interactive ways that you can be doing so. And so that engagement needs to be joint, both marketing and sales and some of your other representatives being in those discussions now, which I would argue on a level could be slightly easier now that we're doing a lot of this virtually. You know, it's not hard to have a virtual session where you can have that cross-functional.
Absolutely, Michael.
Yeah. So you can get it. So everyone's kind of getting, firsthand, as they say, to some of those perspectives and requirements, because that's how you'll also be able to gain alignment and break down some of those silos that.
Absolutely, Michael. That's perfect. And in saying that too, and we're leaking information about what we talk about in our next session, but that certainly will be a part of that discovery discussion. We'll get there, but that's really a tangible activity, like you said, with those group of people. It's a wonderful discussion to have with a prospective buyer, and for those to partake in that discussion, it's very empowering. Very empowering.
It's excellent, but it's also necessary in this environment. From my perspective, it is actually critical because, you know, the needs of business buyers have changed. Whatever clients you have, no matter how much you've loved them and all, you know, if you have not had that kind of in-depth discovery session, which we'll talk about in our next episode here on the live stream, if you haven't had that in the past couple of weeks, then you need to do so, because the world has changed. You know, perspectives from February, March, even May to where things are now are very different, and they could have significantly changed depending on the strategic direction of where your current and or prospective clients are going, and also, you know, what are they looking to do and the markets in which they're looking to do so, because, you know, there's so much change and flux going on with markets opening up, shutting down, industries doing various things. So having that dialogue, cross-functional activity, engaging with the buyers, with those key stakeholders is quite important. You mentioned also, you raised a point which is very important around communication and that cadence internally. Again, there needs to be a lot of dialogue and more interaction on a regular basis between marketing and sales. And I would actually say marketing, sales, your customer success, and your product folk, they need to have a regular cadence from a number of perspectives. And I had someone sending me a question here, so I guess I'm kind of jumping in and answering it. But I think having that regular cadence around weekly meetings, having an exchange around insights in terms of what learnings that you're getting. Marketing, the marketing team often should be the ones driving a lot of those insights from an industry perspective, from a market perspective, some of those buyer customer insights to feed to the sales team to take to some of those meetings and discussions. And similarly, though, the sales team are often going to be having discussions with stakeholders and getting learnings from an industry perspective, from a buyer, from a stakeholder perspective, and feeding those back. So there needs to be that regular cadence of exchange of information. And making sure it's being exchanged, being shared, and also being captured. So then that can feed into what it is that you as the product or service provider can then best deliver to the customers.
That's right.
Two perspectives.
Yeah, I like that. And in terms of that collaboration, well, what happens in that sort of situation from our experience, Michael, by gathering that information and laying it on the table as a source of truth, the friction is less apparent and there's more cohesion and collaboration because we're looking at the data. So it's very much that. Does that make sense? It takes takes the politics a little bit away from that discussion, and we're looking at the data because ultimately that will help us form our strategy moving forward and breaks down those barriers in communication. It's, as I said, it's very empowering, but it's real because the data is real, and you're getting it from those different perspectives.
Absolutely.
Can I just remind people, I think that the question sets, and often enough we get asked, what sort of questions will I ask a client? Well, okay, it seems basic, but realistically, what we said there is about what should we be doing, what should we start doing, what should we stop doing, what should we keep doing, and marrying that with the industry movements. That's a good starting point.
Yes, it is. It is actually a good starting point. And to put a bit of a plug, on my website, listeninnovategrow.com, I do have a toolkit, Deciphering the Business Buyer, and I put together about 15 odd questions in terms of some of those questions, exactly some of the ones you're talking about, Nick, that you should be having as part of those discovery sessions, some of those virtual sessions we're going to be talking about in our next episode. But those are the kinds of things that you want to be making sure you're capturing, and getting answers to those questions are quite critical. So that is available, folks, at listeninnovategrow.com. Deciphering the Business Buyer, and how do you prepare for those meetings? Because buyers they're looking for guidance, they're looking for that prescription as to how to move forward, and they're expecting value from you right from the get-go.
From the get-go, Michael, you're dead right, because our points earlier is that they have the information already, so you best be prepared.
Well, you have exactly,
don't assume they don't, because they do.
Yeah. And they do now, and the data backs it up, because over 75% of business buyers they're doing a wealth of research now, and I'm going to put research in quotes. They're talking to colleagues, they're going to talk lots of webinars, they're listening to live streams, the blogs, the white papers, they're listening to podcasts, they're doing all these raft of things, and not even in a linear fact. They're going back multiple times. And so they've done their homework. So you have to go armed and ready to show how you're going to help them. Can you give them some perspective on some of the things that they're seeing, hearing, and reading? What does it mean for them as well?
I think, Michael, let me say, you put your guide hat on just right there, in that sort of situation, you become that guide right there and then.
Yes, absolutely, and that's quite critical, and giving them the right kind of tools in which how they're going to want to do so. Because for every industry, every stakeholder you have that you're going to have to be interacting with, they may have an affinity to certain kinds of things. It could be demonstrations and trials versus white papers versus blogs. They may want to see actual performance stats, the business case. So it's really understanding what are the different formats, what are the different channels, and really it's all about buyer enablement now. And that is your function of marketing and sales together, is to enable them with tools, information, and advice as they go through that whole buying journey, and making sure you're really demonstrating to them. And we'll talk about this some more in terms of that whole implementation and execution, because often what salespeople have been criticized for is they've been focusing on the transaction and not what happens next, what happens after the transaction. And buyer remorse now is the biggest thing we have to be conscious of product and service providers, that when you do get them to spend, that they do not feel as though, what have I done? So it's really giving that roadmap as to what happens after the sale. That needs to come up as part of your consultations, your discussions, which is going to require more from you, which is going to take a bit more effort. And they are taking longer, and they're doing more research and seeking and checking you out through a variety of means before they're actually approaching you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Michael. And the big thing that we talk about in preparing is managing that risk management piece, which is the risk of promise. What do we actually promise, and protecting that. That's a very big thing that you're talking about, and being prepared, but mitigating the risk of, you say, buyer's remorse. That's a huge part.
Yeah, and that's, again, Nick, great point about mitigating risk, because mitigating risk is one of the key drivers as part of building that decision confidence, that I know what I need to do, I know how this is going to work, what I have to do to get there, and making sure that the complexity and risk is minimized as such. And you can only be able to deliver those things as part of the sales process if you have that clarity of understanding. And this is why the discovery and spending that time doing that work up front, which build value and trust and all those other things, are quite critical. So you know exactly what you need to deliver, and where are deemed to be the risk points and how to mitigate them.
Perfect. Yeah. Excellent.
So In terms of now the whole, so the alignment of sales and marketing, it sounds all great. So, working together, the two teams being quite, coordinated in terms of working together in terms of creating marketing plans, having that regular cadence of meetings, sharing information, sharing insights, and operating cross-functionally. But there's really, to get to that point where you have that aligned organization takes, there's a number of steps that need to happen. I think the first thing is really about bringing your teams together and making sure they're aligned on what are those goals, what are you moving towards? And then there are really kind of three key components to creating an aligned sales and marketing function, which is about data. So making sure you're having a single view and perspective of the customer. And me, Nick, I'm going to say customer/buyer because that's quite critical because we're B2B.
Yes.
Then it's about your process. So how do you actually go about what are the processes, the activities to execute, and the plan by which you're going to execute to generate revenue, to drive growth. And that's where account-based strategies, aka ABM marketing, comes in, and that's something we'll be discussing in an upcoming episode of Livestream. And then your cadence around communication. So I think for today, though, I think the key starting point really is the data, and the data really starts about having a single point of view of the ideal client profile. Now, this is a term, your ideal customer profile. It's something that's tossed around a lot, and everyone says, identify who your ideal client is. And I think this is where data comes in, because there are steps that you have to take to have an understanding of who that client or actual client groups need to be. Yeah. So I think there's probably, and definitely want your perspective on this, Nick, in terms of there's probably three kind of broad categories of data that really have to feed in, that should feed in to helping, the CEO, the leadership team decide on what are those priority client groups, customer groups you're going to be focusing on. I think the first one is really a lot of your current financials right now. Would you say, Nick? In terms of, where are you generating your revenues? What's profitable? What kinds of, products and service offerings? Who are the customers, types of customers where you're getting that longevity or customer lifetime value, if you're going to start using fancy terms. There's certain kinds of product offerings, markets, where are you generating those revenues, those profitable customers as well? I think that's one area. And then from anything that you would add to that, Nick, in terms of some of those financial metrics we should be looking at to be identifying, potential ideal client. Ideal.
Yeah, I think you touched on it, Michael. And the big thing is you've seen the research, and we're doing it ourselves, is looking at our current client base, and performing the same analysis around that in terms of repeat business in some form. And obviously we look at ourselves and we work with businesses to say, and it goes back to those questions. I mean, you're getting some insight in that data up front saying, well, as a company, what should we keep doing? What should we stop doing? What should we do in the future? And then that starts to help us pivot. But then we look at our client base and saying, well, what is our revenue generators at the moment? But where do we need to shift based on that data and feedback? Where is it that we need to shift our services? And that's a big part of it from a revenue driver perspective. But really, that movement from the outward and looking a bit introspectively at our current database of clients. Does that make sense in terms of what it is that drives at the moment revenue, and then what do we need to maybe pivot on in terms of service offering? It's huge at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. So your financial. So the finances around revenue, and we should also look at also be mindful of so revenues, profitability, and understanding what are those client streams, product offering streams that are generating those. Being mindful of cost of acquisition of clients as well. That's something that we need to be mindful of. How much money are we spending through all these different activities and the returns on those? Absolutely. Then there's I guess what they like to call the firmographics. So making sure we understand the characteristics of, in terms of those areas, those products, those offerings, where we're winning, what does that look like? Are there any common patterns around industries, markets, size of companies, those kinds of elements? I think that's another element that you want to look at to see, again, what are those patterns of where are you winning, where is she focusing on? Any observations or comments with regards to firmographics in terms of things?
I think that, Michael, going back to my earlier point, but certainly from a brand promise perspective, and what is it we're trying to deliver, and those we seek to serve, but what is it we're trying to deliver to those, and what are the KPIs that we set against those brand promises? I think that's another element to forming and thinking about that ideal client profile. And I think the work we've done with you previously as a group certainly reduced a lot of noise and had us laser-like in our analysis of who it is that we want to deal with. So I think you're on the right track there, and that firmographics was something that we hadn't stopped and paid attention to.
Yeah. Because you really want to understand, the financials definitely tell part of the story, an important part of the story,
yeah.
But also building some of those geographic, those other firmographic type characteristics also can tell you in terms of both what are some of the patterns in terms of some of your current types of clients you should be focusing on, as well as indicative of some other opportunities as well. And so there are two big elements. And then the third element, so those two combined really will help you get an understanding from an organizational perspective in terms of, what are the kinds of clients in terms of, what do they look like? What industry do they fit? What markets do they sit? What sort of size? Those kinds of dynamics. And that's where often, though, people typically stop. And that's in B2B. There's a third element, though, once you've identified those different types of ideal customer profiles or ideal client profiles, which is at an organizational level. And you may have, 2 or 3, you may have multiple, particularly if you're a larger organization you want to focus on. But that's where often folks stop. And that's where things fall apart, because then once you've identified your ideal client profile, then you need to identify who are the buyers, the decision makers within those. Because at the end of the day, everything that we do has to speak to buyer needs first, and that's where you need to be interrogating through the discovery sessions, through interacting with your sales team, and leveraging insights of your marketing team to understand what I like to call the 5 secrets of business buyers, to know who your buyers are, and that may have changed fundamentally over the past few months. Yes. Who's influencing those decision makers? What do they do? So how do they buy? So what are their sources of information, truth? What are they reading, watching, listening to, going to? Because those will define what you need to deliver in terms of enabling buyers. What are their priorities? And then what are those must-haves that you must bring to the table to have skin in the game to be considered? Are there any expectations in terms of expertise, years of experience, certifications, specializations, licenses that you have to bring to the table? So those are kind of what I call the 5 secrets of business buyers that you also need to know for each of those different ideal customer types that you're going to be going after. That is quite critical. You have an understanding of, and again, you can get those through. Both internally through your sales teams, as well as through direct interaction with your customers, with the buyers, the stakeholders, as a great key starting point.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Michael. I've got to say that as a practice, that's something that we've adopted in the last 6 months, and we are trying to get better at that as an SME ourselves. And those elements to the formula that you just mentioned are critical, but they're wonderful too, because they reveal a great deal, I've got to say. And they're extremely helpful. And can I just say, sorry, you're going to go on, jump in.
If you could expand on how have you found those insights to have been beneficial for you guys in the Best Practice Group, being a professional services firm, so a classic B2B organization yourself. How have you found that in terms of your own efforts in terms of recovery?
Yeah, I can certainly talk about the extension of that by actually practicing that discipline and encouraging our clients that we coach to do that as well. What we've found here, and I think the lovely segue here in a practical sense, is the intelligence that gives us to set up the individualized account plans for those particular businesses. And I'll just say that that's the magic, Michael, and how that is captured and laid out. It is as a single source of truth, and we talk about that collaboration internally with SMEs. They're looking at the one source of information there, and the intelligence and understanding of that particular client. That was all built on those questions that you just asked, and that falls into those account plans, which become our tangible deliverable for that particular client, and how we will approach, what are their needs, what are their patterns of buying, who's involved. It lays a lovely landscape, Michael, and it makes, in terms of time, it cuts down a lot of time, and particularly preparing for a service offering, if you like. It shapes the way that we would approach that particular client with that intelligence in mind. So I just want to make that segue across to the account plans, because that's the outcome that we found to be of great value. And the clients that we're dealing with who have those account plans now, it has them focused and reducing a lot of confusion and noise, because they're focused on the deliverable for that particular client, whether they're about to win the work or planning to win the work, or in terms of the delivery of the service. So I just want to make that lovely segue, because that's what led us as to an outcome, a tangible outcome.
Yes. Yeah. And we're going to be talking more. We'll be kicking off some of that when we talk about virtual selling, because it is a discovery session. It is kind of building up some of this listening, some of these learnings that then can feed into those account plans, which really is really the crux of account-based marketing, account-based strategy, of having identified who your target clients are, who are the target buyers, stakeholders within them, and then what are the activities that you're going to provide, deliver, and engage with them to be able to, retain those clients, grow those clients, and have that longevity and momentum.
Fabulous, Michael, because I think that just the sequence of things you were just speaking about is a lovely bridge. And we're talking about SMEs here, and ourselves included, in terms of resources internally, not always there, but bringing those together and using the segue of the ideal client profile and then the account plan is a lovely bridge between sales and marketing. I've got to say, it's a wonderful tool to bring people together.
Because it has everyone aligned and focused, and we as SMEs don't have the luxury of having, massive budgets and necessarily
resources.
So this gives you clarity and focus. It's all about saying where you can win. So out there in the market, what clients can we win with, and always starting with who you know and who you're working with, because you've got those relationships. So they will give you the time to have those discovery sessions, so you can really interrogate and get into the detail of what you deliver, how you deliver, how you promote and engage, why they chose you. So you can really get the depth, you can get the clarity and focus, so that you can really focus on where you can win with your limited resources and get shorter cycle time and get momentum faster, easier, and then momentum can breed on momentum, because then you can leverage those clients that love you into advocacy programs and all sorts of other marketing strategies and so forth that will help build and grow the business and grow your positioning in the marketplace. So it's win-win.
That's well put, Michael. And I think that the curating of information for those particular audiences, you say, like, you can then start to tailor that information. But there's this can I just say, from a coaching perspective, there's always a fear of not trying for the sake of trying to get it perfect. But this is the thing about the consistent iterations of these things, because they do change over time, that it won't be perfect, but you must try. Does that make sense? Like,
it absolutely makes sense. And you have to try, you have to do, you have to execute, because we are in an environment now where things are fluid and changing. Your customers, your decision makers and buyers, they're changing, and they're changing and moving, and they're seeking direction, and they're not necessarily moving in a linear fashion as well. So it's all about trying to really meet the needs of those clients that we have and we're seeking to get, and it's going to require constant iteration, working together as a team, filtering back.
So that's good, Michael, because I think that cycle of accountability we talk about brings us back to that each and every time. You plan, do, check, act. It's the cycle that we promote.
And that's fundamentally, really, what is your whole strategy and execution planning? It's exactly that. Having that regular cadence and making sure it's functional, making folks are sharing it. That is exactly the key to what's required to really move forward in this new norm that we're in.
I know that we'll talk about that more down the track.
Absolutely. So just before we conclude here, I'm just going to see if I have any questions. I think I answered a couple of those. Oh, I did have one more question. Someone did send me an email this morning asking, with regards to your ideal, in terms of the buyers, are your buyer profiles one and the same once you've identified your ideal client? Very good question, but just to call out with regard to that, you'll have your ideal clients, and you'll have your target buyers, and those can vary amongst your ideal client. But even once you get down to the specific customer level, so a specific client you're focusing on, you're still going to need to understand who are those decision stakeholders that you're going to be involved in. So ideally, from your work, you'll get a sense of some of those key stakeholders that you have to be mindful of, and you're going to have to interact and have to meet their requirements. But there still can be some modifications and nuances once you're starting to look at specific opportunities. So it's very important that you get down to, for each organization, recognizing that there can be variation across your different client profiles. You'll have your target stakeholders, which may vary, which quite well vary, but even still, you have to be mindful that when you're talking from an ideal overall persona perspective, each individual organization might have someone else thrown into the mix.
Yep, perfect. Yep.
Okay, well, this has been a great conversation, Nick. Enjoyed as always.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah.
So for folks who are listening, hope you enjoyed. Please, by all means, any comments with regards to future topics, questions that you have, please send through to info@listeninnovategrow.com. Nick and I will be live again in about 2 weeks' time, where we'll be talking in our next session about virtual selling and what exactly that means for us as SMEs. It's a chance for real opportunity, and we're going to dive into really what that means virtual, because it's a lot more than just technology. It's really, again, continuing on from what we've been talking about in terms of meeting the needs of the new modern B2B buyer. Until next time, I'm Michael Haynes. Nick, great talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, take care, stay healthy, and stay safe. Bye for now.
Bye.